Welcome to Rev'd Up for Sunday, a lectionary podcast from St. Mark's Episcopal Church in New Canaan, Connecticut. I'm John Kennedy.
I'm Elizabeth Garnsey.
I'm Rob Schwartz.
Today we have Jesus talking about a wedding party. That sounds fun, right? But it's really not once you pay attention to it. Not only is this, a wedding with interesting rules about how to get there, but it turns out Jesus is a bit of, a menswear snob in this story. So let's see what's going on here. This is Matthew chapter 22, verses 1 through 14. Once more, Jesus spoke to them in parables, saying, "The kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who gave a wedding banquet for his son. He sent his slaves to call those who had been invited to the wedding banquet, but they would not come. Again, he sent other slaves, saying, 'Tell those who have been invited, look, I have prepared my dinner. My oxen and my fat calves have been slaughtered, and everything is ready. Come to the wedding banquet.' But they made light of it and went away, one to his farm, another to his business, while the rest seized his slaves, maltreated them, and killed them. The king was enraged. He sent his troops, destroyed those murderers, and burned their city. Then he said to his slaves, 'The wedding is ready, but those invited were not worthy. Go therefore into the main streets and invite everyone you find to the wedding banquet.' Those slaves went into the streets and gathered all whom they found, both good and bad. So the wedding hall was filled with guests. But when the king came in to see the guests, he noticed a man there who was not wearing a wedding robe. And he said to him, 'Friend, how did you get in here without a wedding robe?' And he was speechless. Then the king said to the attendants, 'Bind him hand and foot and throw him into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. For many are called, but few are chosen.'" All right.
Mm-hmm. Feeling a little whiplash after that.
Yeah. Yeah, say more.
That's a rough one. Well, it's one of these parables. Last week, Elizabeth said, oh man, this is one of the, what was the word? Not gruesome, but it was one of the tougher parables that Jesus tells. And all of a sudden, here we go, right out, following on the heels of that one.
It's
We're
a lot
Oof.
like it. Yeah, they're very similar parables.
Yeah, well, and he's kind of, we've got this series of parables that he's using to talk to the high priest, or the chief priests and the elders, and we had the parable of the two sons and the wicked tenants, and in both of those there's this similar theme of people who kind of almost get so focused on their own things that that's more important than what they're being asked, and that there's always a welcome extended to others, like we've kind of talked about that radical, extravagant welcome, and that it's like God's always bringing in people, and so we see that playing out a little bit here, but boy, this one's a doozy.
Yeah, I think it's we can't really underscore enough the context here, because not only has he been speaking now for a while to these chief priests and Pharisees in the temple on the heels of him overturning table and all that kind of stuff, and they've challenged his authority and they won't answer him whether it's from God or human origin. And so we're basically, he's already entered Jerusalem on the donkey. We're kind of in the pre-climax of the whole gospel. And so he's really doubling down in clarity on how serious it is to decide where his authority is coming from. And I think, he's at the end here, the man is speechless. I feel like that has to be a reference to them being silent, or, saying, we don't know, when they are being asked where his authority comes from. And so, we there's a parallel of this story in Luke, but Robert Capon says that Jesus has told the story twice in two different ways for two different contexts, two different audiences. Yeah. Like in Luke, he's around a dinner table with, kind of dessert and coffee kind of storytelling and a more gentle judgment at the end. And here, he's really at the end of his rope with these people,
Yes.
and that's it.
Yes.
So it's a really incredible storytelling method where he's continuing the parables he's already told, these 4 that you talked about, and it's like the ultimate last word, And I think we have to also remember that the kingdom of heaven, comparing to this situation, isn't necessarily describing what God is like. It's describing a situation where they have a choice, to come or not, and to enter in recognizing what they're being invited to, And I feel like that's one reading. So
Well, and I'll sorry not to jump on.
we
John's
have lots
coming in,
more to say.
But I did want to say, as far as what you're saying there, that you make a really good point that it's these are, allegories and things like that. So it's not, we shouldn't take this as like, this is literally exactly how God is, or this is telling you exactly that this is God and all of that. And I think the fact that the things that happen in this one especially are so over the top and just like, it's meant to draw your attention to the ridiculousness of it, to really drive home some points and things like that. Because I think when we look at some of the king's actions, we go, no, that's not consistent with what I know God to be like throughout, the scriptures. So,
Yeah. Well, I'm going to be devil's advocate here again, just for fun. And I think this actually is consistent in some ways with how God is depicted in the Old Testament, punishing Israel, his people, for not heeding his message to them through the prophets, to live in a certain way, to live in holiness and righteousness, or to jump a little ahead here to something I thought I'd get to later, Augustine commented on this parable. He's like, what is the wedding robe? He's like, is it the sacraments? He's like, no, because all sorts of people take the sacraments, like good and bad alike. So clearly that's not the thing. Augustine obviously speaking at a time where church order and the sacraments had been fairly well established. So he says what the wedding robe is, and he quotes the first letter to Timothy, which says something about pure love arising in the heart. I'm paraphrasing a little bit. But so Augustine says it's love, and then he ties it into 1 Corinthians chapter 13, the love chapter, that all our faith and all of our good works even, without love, are like worth nothing. So I like that reading. But anyway, so just to say that, that I think in the Old Testament we see people called to live that way as well. There's incredible concern for the marginalized and the vulnerable in the law and the Torah. And this is the way that God calls his people to walk in. But they just are so bad at it, at least over the long haul. And this is one of the great themes of the Hebrew Bible, that God calls God's people to live in a certain way, and they maybe get it for a little while, and then they veer off course. They lapse into idolatry and greed and so on. And so as the Hebrew Bible tells it, in the prophets and in the historical books, God punishes them. God judges them by sending or allowing people like the Babylonians to conquer them and to scatter them around, and this being some sort of means of calling them back, right? So judgment and punishment is always with healing in mind, but nonetheless, there is judgment very, very clearly in the Hebrew Bible, and I would say that what's going on here, what's being described here, is quite consistent with that, because we have Jesus being sent to the people of God as the Messiah. Matthew's pretty clear that that's who Jesus is, obviously, but at this point in the narrative, that's been talked about openly among the disciples and openly among the people who hail him as the Son of David as he comes into Jerusalem. And the drama here is that the religious authorities, the people who should get it more than anybody else, don't get it. They won't get it. They are not receptive to Jesus. And therefore, this parable seems to be talking about a coming judgment on those who rejected not only a prophet, but the Son of God. And it's tough because Matthew doesn't stop there with saying, those people didn't get it, but you who consider yourself, a Christian now, you're good. He has more to say about that there's a warning against any kind of self-righteousness. But anyway, I just wanted to throw that in there to see how, see what your take is on that, because there are these competing, or at least apparently competing notions of who God is that I think come up again and again in Matthew, because Matthew presents, obviously, Jesus as a teacher of nonviolence and forgiveness and inclusion, but there are also these messages of judgment over and over again. And there's a real interesting tension there.
Yeah. I want to advocate just to, and I love that image from Augustine. Thanks for that. It's an amazing way to think about the robe, for sure.
Yeah.
And I do want to advocate for really keeping in view that the context where Jesus is speaking and whom he's speaking to, because these people know their Bible inside and outside. And James Allison points out that there are hidden references in here, hidden to us basically, but probably not to the Pharisees and the chief priests, to Zephaniah, Isaiah, and Deuteronomy. And I just brought it because it's so compelling to me that in Deuteronomy, well, first of all, this word for feast can also be a battle. Like if you're called into a feast, you could be by the wordplay, at least in Hebrew. And so Jesus could be playing on that. And then when they get to the word friend, the word hetare in the Greek is companion, which could be a companion in battle or a companion at a banquet. You know? And so in a way, he's setting up the Pharisees and chief priests to decide, are they going into war or are they going into a wedding banquet? And in Deuteronomy, they give some laws about, or not laws, but guidance. If they're being called into battle, the officials can address the troops and say, has anyone built a house but not dedicated it? He should go back to his house, or he might die in battle, and another dedicated it. Has anyone planted a vineyard and not yet enjoyed its fruit? He should go back to his house, or he might die in battle, and someone else will enjoy the fruit. So, I mean, like they have these reasons they don't have to go. And so here we have something, they have excuses. One goes to his farm, another to his business. And this reference in Zephaniah has to do with the silent one, and that the Lord, it says, be silent before the Lord God, for the day of the Lord is at hand. The Lord has prepared a sacrifice. He has consecrated his guests. And on the day of the Lord's sacrifice, I will punish the officials and the king's sons and all who dress themselves in foreign attire. On that day, I will punish all who leap over the threshold and fill their master's house with violence and fraud. So in a way, he's like pointing out, I think all along this section of Matthew, how that's what these people have been doing, is like filling the temple with violence and fraud. And, when he gets to this person, he sees that the king in the story gets to this person without the wedding robe, saying, friend, companion for battle or banquet. How did you get in here without the robe? The one dressed in foreign attire. And the guy is speechless. And in a way, he's talking to these people who've been speechless to decide, are they at war, or are they gonna enter into the grace freely offered, this banquet, which is, the wedding banquet is the crowning climactic image of the entire New Testament, right? And Revelation is the wedding feast of the Lamb. Yeah. And so I think when we're getting to this penultimate scenes in Matthew before the Passion, it's the ultimatum. This is like Jesus' ultimatum.
Totally.
That which one are you? And since they can't even decide, hell is the place of weeping and gnashing of teeth, is like the place of indecision, the place of complete inability to accept this banquet, and the place of joy. And the Isaiah passage 65 is one that talks about the I will recreate Jerusalem as a joy, and the place where the wolf and the lamb will feed together, and the lion and the cat will be together. So I think that's pretty interesting to me that James Allison was able to draw those out and point them out here, because I think that Jesus is talking to people who hear those references.
Definitely.
And that works for me in a way that doesn't make me have to see this king as a parallel to what God is doing, I mean, it is, but it's sort of like the self-binding up in our indecision, or the self-casting out, like we saw in the last one. Yeah. Right. If you don't want to go to heaven, you can go to hell.
Yeah.
I'm totally with you on that. I think, I believe in the view that when God's judgment and wrath is spoken of in the Bible, it's also allegorical, or at least metaphorical, in that I don't believe that we're meant to understand God as literally getting mad and being like,
I'm going to burn your
I'm
city.
going to send the Babylonians, I'm going to send the Romans. I think that God is the creator of the universe, and that the universe operates in accordance with the wisdom of God, right? And that there is a way to go to live in accord with that wisdom. The natural world does that naturally. We're in this sort of apparently unique position of being able to go with the flow or not. And that when we go against the current, if you will, things don't go so well for us. It's like...
so well said.
Yeah, it's like, when you go to the dentist and he's like, or she's like, you should floss more and maybe brush for more than 30 seconds. And you're like, okay. And then you come back in a year and your teeth have fallen out because you didn't listen. It's not like the dentist did this to you, but the dentist is an authority on the laws of teeth, right? I'm just telling you how it is.
Right.
And so that's how I see it. But that God, has created a universe where we can't just do whatever we want.
So that's what gnashing of teeth means, I guess?
Yes, very good.
I literally had to
Stop
reschedule
grinding your teeth.
my root canal that I had scheduled for this morning because I had the podcast
No
to
way.
do.
That's
So
hilarious.
now you're making me really self-conscious. I hope my
I
dentist.
hope I didn't cut you off.
Not at all.
I hope my
Not at
dentist
all.
doesn't watch
I
this
think that was
podcast.
But children, brush your teeth.
Yeah.
For all the
2
children
minutes
watching.
twice a day. Yeah.
That's a great analogy. Yeah.
Well, and one of the, just getting to some of the sticking on some of the Old Testament stuff too. One of my professors used to say, when you look at this, this pattern of kind of the Israelites are, they start following God and then they kind of fall short and stumble, and then God's welcoming them in again, and then they stumble again, and he goes, is it any? You start to go. It's an amazing thing that the exile didn't come sooner. The right things were happening, but it's this idea of no matter how many times we stumble, that there's always this welcome extended to us.
Yeah.
And one of the things I found interesting, and you touched on a lot of it, some of the things from Isaiah and whatnot, and also in Hosea. We get this metaphor of the wedding kind of being God, the relationship between God and Israel, and that the banquet's kind of that covenant between them. And Matthew's really making a big point here that, this is something that there's a sense of urgency to this, and to respond, and don't just, dawdle and do your own thing, but
Right.
respond to what God's called you to.
Yeah, that phrase, many are called, but few are chosen. We just heard the one about the two sons where they both were called to go into the field, and one had to change. One said yes and did not go, and the second one says no and does go. And the one who finally goes recognizes, it's good to be in my Father's vineyard or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think that phrase is about recognizing what you're being called into, and it's so hard to accept that something free and lavish and unmerited and good and bad alike. It says right in the parable that he invited all the good and bad off the streets. When that becomes sort of plan B in the story, but it's kind of God's plan A from the start, right? Like everyone's supposed to want to come in because this is being offered so freely. And that from the time of the prophets, from beginning, Jesus or God in the Old Testament's always talking about the vineyard. Israel is my vineyard and my plantings. And, it's a place of celebration and joy and communion, right? And it's always trying to get the people back to that. Another Caponism, Pharaoh-Caponism is we will sooner accept a God we will be fed to than one we will be fed by.
Oh, fascinating.
Ooh,
Yeah.
nice.
That is fascinating. Yeah. This makes me think about how, so many of us in the world today, and clearly not a new phenomenon based on this text, put off the really important stuff. How often do we hear in ministry, like, oh, I really want to come back to church, but so busy. I'm saying this with a lot of compassion and not being snarky at all, but this is just such a common refrain. And people are busy. It's a real thing. But that life gets crowded life gets crowded with, urgent things and things that come up and things that you feel like you have to deal with, things that people are telling you have to do, or you think that people are expecting you to do, and stuff you don't really want to be doing, but you find yourself doing anyway, like scrolling through Instagram endlessly. Like, why am I doing this? It's because there's billions of dollars worth of technology and research to keep you hooked on that. And then you're like, okay, well, I guess I don't have time to meditate or go to church or whatever the thing is that will nourish my spiritual life, my soul. And this is drawing attention to the fact that we have limited time, and we don't know how limited our time is. We live with the illusion of like, I'll live till like I'm 80 or 90.
I got all this time in the
We really
world.
have no idea. And even if we do live till we're 80 or 90, that goes kind of quick.
Right.
And life has seasons, and the seasons, have their time and then they end, and, whether that's the time when you're a young adult or the time when you're raising a child, like all of those are little blocks of a hopefully much longer life, but they're so precious and ephemeral in a way. And I think that a parable like this is a call to really show up for our life in a way. I mean, obviously that's not what Jesus is talking about directly. He's talking more directly about responding to him and responding to God through him. But I think it's all of a piece, that the depth and richness of life that we're looking for is obviously found when we're in communion with God. And that it's important to prioritize that now.
And to relax into it. It's supposed to
Yes.
be a feast. Like these people
Yes,
they
indeed.
just come in, they're handed a robe. I mean, that's the custom, I guess, at the time, was to be provided with a tunic, and you didn't even have to come prepared. You just were
Nice.
they were
Yeah.
invited in, and the hall was filled with guests, good and bad alike. And the king wasn't questioning whether they deserved to be there or bought a ticket or any of that stuff. It's just, he filled the hall with guests.
Yeah.
And it's so hard for us to relax into the ease of just being accepted,
Definitely.
and loved and invited into this way.
I think so. Yeah, I think what sometimes puts people off to pursuing spiritual practice or religious devotion is the idea that it's hard.
I know.
Yeah.
We love that.
Yeah, we're addicted to that on some
Right.
level. But that also keeps us at a remove. But we have to show up. But when we do, it seems like everything else flows quite naturally. Augustine, again, talking about the wedding robe. I mean, in my own experience of contemplative practice or prayer, meditation, that the hardest thing is just showing up. And that once I do, the rest just kind of goes of its own accord, that it feels like I'm not really doing anything. I just feel and live and move and literally breathe in a much easier, more natural and harmonious way. And I think that it feels like being invited to the wedding feast. Like, oh,
The hard part's accepting all the other guests.
yes, yes it is.
I mean,
As we're hearing in the story,
I think that's
in both
part of
in
the teaching.
Jesus is talking to and in the parables themselves.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know if you've got a couple other things you wanted to tackle. Otherwise, I know we finally do have a voicemail that came through, so that's
we
pretty
have a
cool.
voicemail. That's exciting. Yeah. No, I think we covered the important things, how to make sense of the judgment talked about in this parable, how important it is to brush our teeth, and how easy it is once we actually show up. So with that, I think we'll turn to our first Rev'd Up for Sunday hotline voicemail that we've received. A reminder, you can always call in at 203-442-5002. That's 203-442-5002. And listen to our first voicemail to hear just how easy it is.
Hi, good afternoon. This is Zuhair Sweden, and I just listened to your podcast. Reverend Elizabeth, Father John, and Rob, you guys do magic in your exploration of every word in each one of those parables, and I get enriched by it. I listen to probably the majority of the podcasts that you have, and I'm sorry I missed some. In any case, that's about it, and I thank you for the podcast and all the wisdoms and explanations that you walk us through.
That was Zuhair Sweden.
That's right.
Hi, Zuhair. Thanks for the voicemail.
Yeah.
And thanks for the very, very generous, kind words. It's
Very kind, yes. Thank you.
It's great to know you're out there listening.
It is, yeah.
And it's a great, it's very rewarding for the three of us to be doing this, and it's been a real treat for me to be able to kind of hop on for a little bit from behind the camera to in front of the camera with you guys and kind of engage, and this is a great chance for all of you at home, wherever you are, to also engage with us. Whether you're commenting on one of the audio podcasts or on YouTube, or calling into the voicemail so we can engage with you here. It's really a treat. So
yeah, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah. We're so glad that you listen, that you engage with us. It's really an honor. So please like, comment, subscribe, and we will see you next time.